I'm Haitian American, and in Haitian culture, a storyteller cannot begin her story without the audience's permission. So when I say cric, you say crack. Cric, crack. Cric, crack. This is from Word Warriors. It's called Protégé. In 1985, my uncle Sego, fresh from a mental institution, moved into our small, government-owned apartment in Dorchester, Massachusetts. Sego, as tall, vain, charming, and flamboyant as I imagine Oscar Wilde must have been, was my favorite eccentric relative and also a poet. One would never have guessed he was unemployed. He owned countless pairs of handmade Italian leather shoes. He wore silk blend Spanish suits exclusively. He generally scoffed at blue jeans, but once bought a designer pair from a strung-out street vendor in Roxbury. When lined up in his closet, his expensive imported clothes had the effect of an open box of crayons. My uncle was the color of ground coffee, cruelly handsome, a bit of a philanderer, and slightly effeminate. He blended 3 different women's perfumes to create his potent, aura-outlining signature scent. His hair shone like a gel-induced halo. And when he smiled his saccharine, secretive smile, he flaunted a top right canine tooth encased in gold. Sego was a Caribbean Adonis. His mildest flaw was an aggressive stutter, but when he stood behind pulpits to recite his epic poems, even the stutter disappeared. My uncle was famous in our Haitian American Seventh-day Adventist community. Church services usually went from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., but every Sabbath, Sego's performances broke the monotony of an excruciatingly long day. Since he wrote poems in Haitian Creole, we considered him to be a literary revolutionary. In old-school Haiti, French was the language of business, politics, and literature, while Creole, the language of the people, the langue lacaille, or home tongue, was dismissed as common patois. Despite the fact that over half of the Haitian population could not read or write in French, for too long, French was the only official national language of the island. Our church in the US was committed to this classist, colonized thinking. In an effort to sound more holy, most hymns, psalms, testimonials, and sermons were delivered in somber, formal French. Sego rebelled. He felt determined to craft and deliver Creole in a way that was unmistakably ceremonious. His poems always rhymed. They were didactic, but clever, and often funny. He was a gregarious, generous performer. Sweat poured from his forehead as he leapt off the pulpit into the congregation, punching his fist into the air to punctuate his words. Sego was a sanctified slam poet. Whenever he finished reciting, the congregation erupted into one booming, collectively uttered, Amen. Try it. Amen. His work appealed to the members of our church with multiple degrees and to the illiterate. My uncle was never published or awarded or even interviewed, but in our enclave, he was a brilliant star. When I was 5 years old, Sego took me on as a protege. Write me a poem, he demanded one afternoon when he was babysitting and I was bored. He pulled out a blank yellow legal pad and specified that I should fill at least one side of a page with rhymed couplets. I dutifully took on the assignment, laboring over a soulless rant about fat cats wearing big hats and breaking bats. When I returned with my completed, albeit amateur, assignment, Sego slowly stroked his goatee in seemingly serious contemplation of my work. Not bad, he said, marking my stanzas with his red pen, but you can do better. An hour later, I approached him with my second draft. I'm done, I sung. I stuck the paper out for him to grab, eager for easy praise, but he only held my wide-eyed gaze, crossed his arms, and shook his head no. This time, you have to read it to me, he said. And after I did, he asked, what do you think of it? And I had to admit that what I had written made very little sense. Keep writing, he told me. Practice every day until it is perfect. That day, I learned 3 lessons. 1, you should write about things you feel passionate about. I owned no fat cats, big hats, or bats. 2, serious writing requires meticulous editing. And 3, a poem is not finished until you share it. Sego did not join us when my mother moved us to nicer projects in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He got his own small apartment and a day job as a cab driver, but continued to serve as a sounding board for my earliest work. A lot went down in the early 1990s. Bush Sr. declared war. Haiti's Jean-Bertrand Aristide was democratically elected and then violently forced into exile for the first time. Old men started to stare at my budding breast and catcall to me on the street. Dozens of friends and family members died of a white cell-sucking disease they were too ashamed to name. Rodney King was beaten by racist cops, and some of my female classmates were raped. I filled several 70-page spiral notebooks with my outrage and grief about the increasingly harsh, confusing world around me. I then crafted these free writes into hopeful poems. By the time I was 12, I had written a song against the Gulf War, a rant about the LA riots, and an educational rap about AIDS, among many other pieces. I memorized my writing, swallowed my pre-adolescent self-consciousness, and performed in school talent shows in front of my teachers, parents, and peers. Since the competitions were actually popularity contests, the lip-syncing cool kids garnered the top prizes. Nevertheless, even today, old classmates from the 7th grade can recite the lyrics to my rhymes, and that is more encouraging to me than any $50 gift certificate I could have won back then. By the time I went off to college, Sego had fled to Haiti to avoid a jail time for a crime he claimed he could not remember committing. Missing him, I followed a colorful flyer to the Oak, a now defunct cafe/used bookstore in Ithaca, New York. The Oak was hosting an open mic poetry night every Wednesday to attract customers. At first, the hip-hop loving Dar Williams emulating Jewish boys and I were the only ones rocking the mic. But word spread quickly about our tight-knit community of reciting writers, and soon enough, every week, a racially diverse crowd consisting of student artists, neo-hippie professors, activists, the local schizophrenic, and other misfits filled the joint to fire hazard capacity. In the late 1990s, poets became celebrities, featured on the covers of major magazines and in award-winning feature films. All over the world, poetry was the new cool, and Ithacans flocked to the Oak to experience the phenomena of the spoken word live. The atmosphere was always celebratory and unconditionally supportive. Anything went. An open mic poet could recite something abstract about the sun and the stars, something intimate about her dying grandparent, a journal entry about her cheating lover, or a didactic political rant about reproductive rights. She could recite rhymed couplets, sonnets, haiku, free-form verse, or freestyle rap. Unless a poem was racist or misogynist, almost every poet who had the courage to get up and read was met with rock star applause. We praised poets' bravery when we couldn't praise their craft. I thrived at the Oak. Every week, Jordan, the host, reserved the 7th slot for me to practice performing my texts. Between the acting, writing, dance, and sociology courses I took at Ithaca College and my regular spot at the Oak, I developed my artistic voice and a highly physical performance style. I also made really good friends at the cafe. The bisexual sex major who organized an annual How to Make Your Vagina Sing conference. The long-haired, long-winded, goddess-worshipping, yoga-practicing massage therapist who would be my last boyfriend. The sexy, chain-smoking photographer in chic vintage clothes who became the first girl I ever kissed. When I went home for winter breaks, I desperately missed my Okies. Since I was a first-generation college student, my family members and I were ill-equipped for how much I would evolve at school. I lost interest in their strict Christianity, male-dominated conversations, and spicy fried foods. They were likewise annoyed by my refusal to go to church, my outspoken feminism, and my politicized vegetarianism. When I tried to communicate with my stepfather in my expanding vocabulary, he teased me, "What did the white woman say?" My mother, bless her, listened to my new poems patiently, but when push came to shove, she could not understand my metaphors. We fought constantly. As much to my chagrin and against my will, I was perfecting the ability to pass for middle class. One lonely, pissed-off January night in Cambridge, I snuck out and signed up for the Amazon Slam, a monthly poetry competition then based on the second floor of a popular jazz club called Riles. I had not yet studied the Amazons, so it wasn't until I made it to the semifinal round that I looked around the room and realized that most of the poets, judges, and audience members were lesbians. Somehow, without really meaning to, I had walked into a room full of my people. Word-loving, women-loving women. Thrilled and turned on, I offered my most centered, confident performance, and I won the slam. By the time I finished college, I had competed in 2 national poetry slams, recited poems in front of Anna Devere Smith, who was one of my heroes, and Cornel West, another hero, and shared stages with Dar Williams and Alex Olson. When I introduced myself to strangers, I called myself a poet. I said this word, poet, before I said Haitian American, or pomosexual, or playwright, or performance artist, or any of the other words that make up my identity. When people asked about how or why I started writing, I always told them about Sego. By then, I was also sharing an apartment with my current partner, another regular at the Oak. When Sego found out I was in love with a woman, he loudly disowned me. He lost his eloquence and called me a madivinez sale, dirty dyke in Haitian Creole. Shouting through a telephone from Port-au-Prince, he insisted he would see me in hell. "You are dead to me," he said. But I am a poet, anyway, and very much alive. I craft personal, political stories for social justice, for the planet and people I love, and yes, even for Sego. If he could see me now, one hand punching the air with my fierce, feminine, feminist fist, perhaps his heart would sing. If he could hear me now, singing protest songs in our langue lakai, I think my crazy, troubled uncle would be so proud. Thank you.